the Dharma. Learn about the mind. And I just ran into a guy at the top of the hill here in this swamp forest. There was a guy just sitting there under one of those silver blankets, emergency blankets. I stopped and talked to him, made sure he was okay. Because it's cold. I was wondering what's going on. Why are you sitting there in that emergency blanket? And it's an appearance of the seeds that have been nourished here in this area of the mind system. So that appearance of this unhoused cold guy, it shows me which seeds have been nourished here. It's totally relevant to what we've been learning about. All appearances, according to this teaching, appear because certain seeds have been nourished and other seeds have not been nourished. So things appear the way they do. We have heard Thich Nhat talk a lot about this, saying that the quality of the seeds of our collective and individual store consciousness, the quality of the seeds determines the quality of life. And as Buddhists, and especially engaged Buddhists following Thich Nhat, this suffering matters. How we farm the field, how we work the field, determines what grows. And this is teaching on karma and result. Karma means action. Result is what happens with actions. All actions have results. And the nature of the action influences, impregnates, or flavors the result of the action. So Jesus taught about karma too. He said something about how grapes don't grow from thistle seeds. If thistles are growing, that must mean thistle seeds have been planted and nourished. The seeds of suffering have been planted and nourished, and they are continually nourished by our action. And we see appearances of homelessness and suffering. And every appearance has an individual and a collective aspect. That's a thing that Thich Nhat keeps emphasizing. So that person who's cold there up at the top of the hill, there's an individual story happening, but there's also this collective story. And in short, this kind of suffering is becoming more and more common. There's an explosion of homelessness. Obviously, we are doing something wrong. Now, I'll read about the fields of perception. We started reading this yesterday, but we'll start over today and just read the full chapter, or as much as I feel like reading. Fields of perception. Manifestations from store consciousness, so those appearances I was talking about, they can be perceived directly in the mode of things in themselves as representations indicating things in themselves, or as mere images, not connected to the things as they are. Pure fantasy, delusion. So we have these three modes. All are included in the 18 elements of being. And yesterday I was having trouble with that phrase, the elements of being, the 18 elements of being, because I know of the 18 ayatanas, the field of the sense minds, the objects they encounter, and the consciousness resulting from contact between them. So when I see 18 elements of being, I think ayatanas. But then the way Tai was describing it, I wasn't sure. And I'm still not sure what these 18 elements of being really are, but we will see as I read. And isn't this beautiful? Pure land. Present moment. When seeds in our store consciousness manifest themselves in conscious awareness, either we perceive them directly or we do not perceive them directly. And that not perceiving them directly, those are the two modes that we saw earlier, representations and mere images. And then perceiving them directly, that's what I would call knowing with a G, like gnosis. So we either perceive them directly as gnosis or we do not. And in that way we encounter representations and also images of pure imagination, which can be cool in their own way. So there are three modes or fields of perception. Direct perception, knowing with a G. Representation, symbols that point to gnosis. Or mere images, symbols that don't point anywhere. According to these teachings of Buddhist psychology, the way we perceive reality has everything to do with our happiness and suffering. So that answers the question, why do we care that there are these three modes of perception? We care because we're Buddhists, and we've aimed our lives at the dismantling of all the structures that support suffering. We want to understand perception because the way we perceive reality has everything to do with our happiness and suffering. The way we perceive reality will also influence our action. We will say certain things based on our perception of reality, or we won't say certain things based on our perception of reality. And we will do things, and we won't do things based on our perception of reality. And what we say and do and think, it does influence the experience of others, contributing to suffering or not. The first field of perception is the perception of things in themselves. Again, when I write, I call it knowing. Direct experiential knowing. This is perceiving directly, without any distortion or delusion. But see, on this level of gnosis, our understandings attained there are very difficult to bring back down into the world of thinking and speaking. The beings who are able to course in that direct knowing, that's rare. And then it's even more rare that those beings who know how to course in direct knowing should decide to teach. And that's what makes our Buddha special, is that he perfected direct knowing without losing touch of these indirect, dualistic mind systems. He decided to teach. And in Buddhist legend, we have that story. He was thinking about just remaining in the bliss of meditation, of awakening. He was like, why would I go back and enjoy or confront the world? I'll just sit here and enjoy the bliss of samadhi. And then the legend says Brahma appeared. I'm pretty sure it was Brahma. And asked the Buddha to teach, because there are some who are ready, with little dust in their eyes, willing to learn. So I'm talking about this because a Buddha is a being that has perfected this kind of knowing, this deep, direct knowing. And then a Buddha is a being who uses that deep knowing beyond thoughts and words, in the realm of thoughts and words and bodily actions, to reduce suffering, increase happiness, and increase understanding. So this is why this stuff is important to me. Understanding the mechanics of the mind system will make our action, our thinking, our speaking and doing much more effective. So there's this field. The first field is the field of direct knowing, without distortion or delusion. And it's very difficult to bring these kinds of understanding back down into the world. And this is the only one of the three modes of perception that is direct. And we already went over that. This way of perceiving is in the realm of namana, or suchness. Suchness, tatata, means reality as it is. Things as they are, in themselves. And things get tricky here, because suchness in Buddhist thinking can't be just some other thing. The true nature of things can't be some other thing. The true nature is beyond thingishness. So suchness, it's like one of the last things we can say about suchness is that it is shunya, empty of thingishness. So here Buddhist philosophy does interesting things. Suchness is not other than emptiness. The true nature of all things is emptiness. So that's what suchness is, the true nature of things. And then if you follow the Buddha and look at what he says about things, you'll see he says they're empty of a permanent, separate self. They're empty of a inherently real core essence. The core essence of all things and all beings is said to be all not self elements. So literally the beings and the things are made of everything they are not. So this stuff, it gets tricky and beautiful and useful. Another name for the Buddha is Tathagata, and that's built up from the word that we just encountered, suchness, tatata. So Tathagata means the one who has come from us. And if you change the emphasis on the word, so it's Tathagata, then it changes meaning. And so it's either one who comes from suchness or one who goes to suchness. So a Tathagata is a Buddha, and a Buddha or a Tathagata is a being who's fully aware of suchness, arises from suchness, and returns to suchness. We are all potentially full Buddhas. We have to do some work and turn on some lights, but we have that in our nature. We have those seeds in our store consciousness, Buddha seeds. If we nourish them, and if we find communities where friends can help, we can do a lot of good work, a lot of good farming of the mind field. And we can make some Buddha plants grow. So that's suchness. It means the one who, or Tathagata means the one who comes from or goes to suchness. Everything, a leaf, a pebble, you, me, everything comes from suchness. Everything is already suchness. But not everything knows. Suchness is the ground of our being. And we could just as easily say emptiness. Emptiness is the ground of our being. Just as water is the ground of being of a wave. And this water wave way of looking at things is useful. So beings, you and me, we're like waves on this great ocean of mind. We do have different characteristics. If you look at the waves, this one's taller, it's moving differently than that one. And so on this level, at the surface, thoughts and words make sense. Like, oh, there's that wave. I can distinguish it from these other waves by these characteristics. But ultimately, it's all just water. So those are the two dimensions of truth that Buddhist teachers have used for thousands of years to help make sense of these teachings about reality and causation and mind. The two truths are like looking at the surface of the ocean where wind has acted to stir everything up. And then that's conventional or relative truth. And then you move deeper and look to see, oh, all this is really just the ocean. And then we would be in the realm of ultimate truth. Are we capable of touching reality in itself? The Buddhist teachings say we can. If we do the work, if we engage in the training with diligence and energy, we can. A flower can be the manifestation of the world of suchness if we perceive it directly. And perceiving directly is special, it's different. It's beyond subject and object. When you perceive a flower directly, you aren't perceiving a separate flower. That idea that you're separate has been dismantled. It all depends on our mode of perception, whether we touch the suchness of the flower or only a representation of the flower or a fantasy about the flower that doesn't correspond with reality. It all depends on the way we habitually perceive the world, which is something Thich Nhat was talking about earlier. These habit energies not only influence our obvious actions, like when we normally think of habits, we think of, oh, I habitually eat too much candy. But habit energies are at work in the way we perceive reality and think of the world and ourselves and our relation to the world and others. It's all mind-made. So if we train and follow after those who we see are wise, we can do good things. We can touch the flower beyond the representation of the flower, beyond the fantasy about the flower. Our perceptions rarely reach the mode of things in themselves, however. And this is what we were talking about earlier. Buddhas are rare. Even Buddhists today in the USA are relatively rare. There are people who are aware of Buddhism and they enjoy Buddhism, but then there are even, a smaller selection among those who actively try to implement the teachings of the Buddha in their life every day. So I'm just saying, it's rare. Direct perception of reality in itself would be super rare. We usually perceive things in the other two modes as representations of things in themselves or as straight delusions. When we fall in love, for example, we usually fall in love with an image we have created of our beloved. And this image has it has characteristics that we have inherited. We inherit these images about who our lover should be. Women are like this, men are supposed to do that, whatever. We inherit these inclinations, preferences. And this is what Ty was talking about when he said that we inherit our seeds. So our mere images of our loved ones are not often healthy images. And there are individual stories that we could tell about why that image is created for that being, but there are also collective influences. And we inherit these unhealthy images that we use to cover over each other. So mindfulness of what we've inherited will be useful. Mindfulness of how we project images onto our loved ones will be extra useful. Because with awareness, mindfulness, I notice that most people tend to avoid harm. If we are aware of what we're doing, it becomes more difficult to harm beings. So mindfulness is always good. We gotta be careful with these images we project onto each other. And so these three modes of perception that Ty is talking about here can be useful. When we project an image that has no basis in reality, we'll be aware of what's happening and we can stop it. So we have those images that are pure imagination, and then we have representations of things as they are. And these would be like Buddhist teachings that point the way to truth, but are not truth themselves. And then on the direct mode of perception, we would directly, experientially understand those truths that have been pointed to. So, when we fall in love, we usually fall in love with an image we have inherited and created of our beloved. We cannot eat, sleep, or do anything because this image is so strong. Our beloved is beautiful to us, but our image of him may actually be far from reality. And any image that is held for too long will end up being, untrue. It'll deviate from the actual reality because all beings are always transforming. One mask will never be enough. We don't realize that the object of our perception is not the reality in itself. It is an image we have created and we have inherited. After we marry and live with our beloved for 2 or 3 years, we realize that the image we had, that we had held on to and stayed awake at night thinking about, was largely false. The object of our perception, our image of our beloved, belongs to the second mode of perception, the mode of representations. Our consciousness manifests an image of the object, and we love that image. The image we love may have nothing to do with the person in himself. And then, it's in the realm of mere image. Above mere image, we have representation, which representations can be useful because they represent the truth. And they'll point the way. It is like taking a photograph of a photograph of a photograph of a photograph. We are unable to reach the mode of perceiving things as they are in themselves because we have inherited distorted images, representations, not direct perceptions. It is not 100% part of the world of suchness because it contains only a small part of the reality it is based on. The person we love is not a real person, but an image we've created and inherited through this field of mind. This false perception can create suffering. False perception would be delusion or ignorance. And it's dangerous. Thich Nhat talks a lot about how delusion or false perception or wrong views are often causes of suffering. The false perception often creates suffering. And it takes work to remove these false perceptions. It's not always easy. But it matters because it's a cause of suffering. And so the Bodhisattva works to address the situation. Sitting in the car next to our spouse, we completely ignore her because we think that we already know everything about her and that there is nothing interesting to learn about her anymore. And this is a thing I think a lot about. To say, I know you, you are like this, that in itself is a kind of violence. It's trying to force people to remain within the boundaries of our notions of who they are. So we end up thinking that we know each other, then we end up getting bored because we aren't seeing the real continual transformation that's always happening. We are caught in these kinds of feelings and perceptions, which are based on delusion. Sometimes anger and hatred replace love, but these perceptions do not correspond to the realm of things in themselves either. In this way, we may live with someone for 30 years and still be unable to comprehend the truth of that person. Perhaps our present image of her is closer to the world of things in themselves than the image we had 30 years ago, but it is still an image. It still belongs to the world of representations, and representations can either correspond to what's really there or not. Scientists have acknowledged that they don't even know what a speck of dust really is. Looking deeply into an electron, we bow our heads in awe. And yet, here is a human being sitting next to us, and we think we know everything about her. It's arrogance and delusion. We hate or love depending on these images we ourselves create and inherit. Most of our perception, longing, and aversion occur in the mode of representations, or in the third mode of perception, the mode of mere images, pure fantasy, just delusion. We too must always continue to learn. We need to look closely at the things we think belong to the world of things in themselves and see whether they are really only representations or if they're only mere images. So we think we know what things are, and that influences our everything. And these misperceptions and these wrong views that are formed based on our assumptions that, thinking that things really are the way we think they are, all sorts of problems arise. Sometimes anger and hatred replace love. But if we look deeply at what's actually happening, we see great complexity. Wild, untamable complexity. But the Buddha makes it clear. We always should continue to learn with the awareness that things are not what we think they are. Their true nature can't be contained by thought. So, we learn to use thought skillfully to point to direct experiential understanding. But thinking will always be useful and dangerous. But there is a skillful thinking and an unskillful thinking. And if we listen to the Buddha and Thich Nhat Hanh, we will learn the difference between that kind of thinking that nourishes the seeds of hatred, jealousy, racism, and everything bad, and the other kind of thinking that undoes all of the damage that has been done by thinking. It sounds kind of crazy, but it makes sense if you pay attention. The third mode of perception is the field of mere images. In this mode of perception, what we perceive are purely images. If while walking in the street, you see a dog, your perception of it belongs to the realm of representations. It points to the being there we call dog. If you go home and dream of the dog, your dream image is in the field of mere images. In our dreams, we see people, mountains, and rivers. All of these belong to the realm of mere images. When we practice visualization, we are also using images drawn from this third mode of perception. All images, whether we perceive them in the mode of representations or the mode of mere images, are ultimately false. And that's a big statement. All images are false. They are not a direct perception of things in themselves. According to these teachings of Buddhist psychology, we live much more in the world of representations and mere images than in the realm of direct perception. So we habitually perceive images and representations without even knowing it's possible to see and directly, experientially understand, to attain gnosis. Our consciousness rarely touches reality. We imprison ourselves in our own distorted images of reality. And that's where I'm going to stop reading today. Thank you for joining me. If you haven't already, you should subscribe to this channel because I'll be paying more attention to YouTube, and this is where I'm going to start sharing. It's difficult to get my friends on Facebook over here, though. Facebook doesn't like that I'm trying to share YouTube videos. Strange things keep happening, and I imagine their algorithm already doesn't like to share YouTube links because Facebook can share videos on its own, and having customers drawn away to YouTube is not in Facebook's interest. So it makes sense. It's not a grand conspiracy, but it's annoying. I'm trying to let my community in Facebook know that I'm here, and I've put a lot of work into those communities, and now I don't have easy access to the people because I got hacked, and the person who hacked me posted horrible things and got my profile banned. And I have contacts within Meta, and they've been super helpful in the past. But for some reason right now, they're refusing to help me. And without their help, I can't really change much about my profile, and the algorithm will go on thinking that I should be restricted and limited because I share horrible things. But I didn't do that. And it's clear to anybody who looks that I was hacked. So yeah, it's frustrating. I'm just describing what has gone on. And then I remembered YouTube exists. So I'm trying to let people know, here I am, and you can help me. You sharing a link and saying, oh, here Prem is. He's talking about Buddhism here now. YouTube.com/ and then there's that @ symbol, Buddha Gang. It's weird to see that symbol in a URL. youtube.com/@BuddhaGang. You could help me. Share, subscribe. Thank you, and goodbye.